Chapter 56. Are you sure there are no omens here? Kimberly said for the third time. I'm sure, I said. I'll keep an eye out. She was nervous, but how could I blame her? The last time we had gone to the library, the vets had acted like we were walking into a lion's den while covered in lamb's blood. The library, which had once been so thick with omens that turning my head too fast would make me nauseous from the flashes of storyline posters on the red wallpaper, was just a normal library. Almost. It was under construction. We had 4 days left and we had resorted to checking and rechecking every place in town that might have a missing clue of what we should do next. What we knew for sure was that we didn't want to wait until the default omen for the third story arrived. That omen would not lead us to the real version of the storyline. We wanted the true ending, just as we had gotten the true ending for the second storyline. The library shelves were covered in sheets. The hallways were blocked off. The entire place was being renovated. Even the jobs board outside was under renovation. It would be until after the centennial. Ha ha. You're back, Constance Barlow said as she saw us walking up to her desk. I am sorry to say that the library is still being renovated. I understood why Paragons had to pretend to be NPCs most of the time. Having them be meta all the time would make things too easy. After all, they did appear to be trying to beat the through line, too, in their own way. If they could help, they would. Constance was the researcher Paragon, and even when she had been acting as a player, she couldn't tell us as much as she would like. Carousel limited her script because she knew too much. Her most potent memories were literally locked away from her. She had memories from before Carousel had a death game attached to it. It made sense Carousel would make those off limits. Those weren't the memories we were after, though. We wanted help figuring out the last piece of the puzzle for the tutorial. Alright, Constance, Ant-Man said. I'm sorry to do this, but we're back to try again. Perseverance is key, Constance said. I'm sure you'll keep digging up the past until something turns up. May I suggest this book on Bartholomew Geist? He was known to be a very effective negotiator. That's not what I remember, Isaac said. He watched her as she stamped library books. You know, Ms. Barlow, if this library has been under renovation for the last 30 years, it would be weird for you to always be stamping returned library books still. He was at it again. She was mildly entertained but still professional. 30 years is a long time for anything to happen. If you check the calendar by the door, you'll see we only started the renovations last week. Patrons who checked out books before then would still be returning them, so it makes sense that I am checking them back in. Isaac looked over at the calendar. I'll get you one of these days. Isaac had really taken a fascination with calling out places where the continuity loop was broken, as he put it. It was interesting when we thought about it. An entire town being reset to the eve of a holiday celebration that would never come. The logistics were mind-boggling. How could you live your life if every day was New Year's Eve? Look, I said. We want the good ending to the third storyline. That means we have to trigger the storyline before the 2-week break is up, right? She continued to stamp books and stack them on a cart next to her desk. A good ending? Constance asked. Aren't you a little old for choose-your-own-adventure books? You'd think so, I said. I was feeling brave, ready to go out on a limb. We know the story involves Lillian Geist. We didn't know that. I was guessing. Constance didn't speak for a moment. Lillian Geist, she said. Poor woman. I guess that would make your story non-fiction then, wouldn't it? Would it? Was the story of the Geists real or fabricated? The more I learned about them, the more I started to think it was somehow both. Is there a way you might let us take a peek in the non-fiction section? Kimberly asked. I'm afraid not, Constance said. The books in the section you were after had to be sent out for repair. They got extensive smoke damage. I couldn't say how. She looked over to the Carousel History non-fiction section, right above the children's section. She was making a joke. The vets used to start a fire in that section to artificially remove a mobile omen from the library when they needed to come here. We just need to find the true ending, I said. I didn't read her as annoyed. She did seem frustrated, though. I couldn't blame her. Given what we knew about the through line, the answer we were looking for was probably going to be simple even if concealed by layers of distraction. The original tutorial was simple enough. If you figured the story out as you went along, you got the true ending. If you didn't, you got a basic version of the next story. Our answer was somewhere, but it was possible we wouldn't think of it until after the tutorial. The true ending to Lillian Geist's story, Constance said. The townsfolk must be rubbing off on you if you are that obsessed with the Geists. We're superstitious here. We never really believed they died off. We always thought there would be more of their story to tell. Then again, maybe not everyone wants the true ending. Maybe burning up in a fire is a better end than the other possibilities. I mean, if she hadn't died in that fire, think of all the worst things that could have happened. You know, it's funny. Her uncle Carlisle and cousin Benson escaped fiery deaths just months before she died. Of course, they ended up dying shortly after, anyway. I guess when your time is up, it's up. She was referencing the factory fire in the movie set Disaster, which preceded the manor blaze. Are you saying that Carlisle and Benson would have died in the factory fire? I asked. We didn't know that. The article we had available didn't say they were there when it happened. As the town historian, she answered, that would be the kind of thing I would know, don't you think? I could see her eyes go on focused as she read her script. Her tone changed to be more hurried. It might be best for you to leave now. We really do have a lot of work coming up. I got the sense that she was cutting things close, but what did that inside actually mean? We turned to leave. Until next time, Isaac said. I noticed that you updated the newspaper rack. Why would you do that if you were under renovation? Why refill it? Constance rolled her eyes playfully. We didn't refill it. The newspaper sent one of their delivery men over. Thank goodness, too, because I like to stay informed, she said, grabbing a newspaper off her desk and waving it. Isaac smiled a toothy grin. We were just at the newspaper place looking for clues, he said as he backed out the library door. They said they had shut down a week ago due to the flood and would not be going to print until after the centennial. Where did the newspapers come from, Constance? Isaac did an air pump as if he had finally beaten Carousel by proving that the continuity loop and resets were not perfect. Constance smirked and went back to her work. We sat on the steps of the library for a couple of hours after that. I felt that if I could just know the edge pieces of the puzzle, I could figure out the middle. I didn't know where to look. There were too many places to look for clues. Which, in itself, was a clue. What do we know that no ordinary team would know going through the tutorial for the first time? I asked. And one took a deep breath. We know who killed Jet Geist, why, and with what weapon. We know someone saved some factory workers using a storyline somehow, and now we know that they also saved Carlisle and Benson Geist, but those two ended up dying anyway. Someone was trying to kill the Geists actively at the end. Not just the passive bad luck they had been living with before. I'm forgetting things. We know about Lillian Geist, Kimberly said. She had spoken passionately about Lillian Geist's plight many times, but now her energy and emotions had drained. She suffered terribly for years because of Silas Dearcon. We don't know why. I lay back on the warm concrete step. It was somehow more comfortable than my cot at the hotel. We just need one thing, Bubby said. One thing to trigger. Whatever is next. Just like when we figured out that the poker was the murder weapon, and we unlocked the second storyline. Easy peasy. Just one thing. We thought and spoke out loud. Isaac made jokes. Cassie told him to stop. Antoine comforted Kimberly, and Kimberly comforted Antoine. Dinah only spoke to correct us when we got a fact wrong. She was vigilant that way. Bobby kept saying things like easy peasy every few minutes. We needed to know what the murder weapon was to play the version of the storyline we played. Otherwise, the answer would have been revealed without any effort, I said. A cop had literally picked us up after figuring the clue out, so we couldn't talk to Jed Geist too soon. What could we know that would be necessary for the next storyline? I thought about what the story could be about. Parts were obvious. The subject was the death of the Geists. Constance practically confirmed that. The info she had just given us was about the Geist deaths, and it was teetering on the edge of being a spoiler. The Centennial was also important, but how could we link those together? I had theorized that Lillian had something to do with it, but I was just missing. "Oh," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cemetery map. I looked to see where Stephen Geist was buried. He was Lillian's father and Jedediah's older brother. He had died in the manor fire. In the distance, a car's wheels squealed. I looked up to see a tan sports wagon making its way down the street quickly toward us. I started to laugh. "Easy peasy after all," I said. "We were overthinking it." "Is that?" Kimberly asked. "Yes," I said. "That is an omen." The tan car was an old model, but it looked new. It wasn't an exact brand I recognized, but it was in the style of early 80s cars. The omen flashed into my mind as I looked at it. "The movie is called The Diecast," I said. "That's ominous," Isaac said. "Difficulty is high," I said. "We activate it by getting in the car when asked." "Already?" Ant-Man asked. What was the thing we needed to figure out? I started shifting my tropes around. I used Location Scout to find out where in Carousel it was set. "It's set all over Carousel," I said. "It's listing off hundreds of places." I don't know what it means. Location Scout usually only listed a few dozen interconnected locations at most. I took a moment to consider how to answer Ant-Man. What had been the thought in my head to trigger the omen? I had been laughing before, but one glance at that movie poster had killed my laughter in my throat. The poster showed a large, muscular man carrying some kind of weapon. I couldn't see what it was. The man was a silhouette. He was staring at a large window where people danced. The language of this poster was familiar to me. It reminded me of the poster for Friday the 13th. I could only hope I was wrong. I decided to start telling my friends what I had discovered. "What connected all of the disasters we have learned about?" I asked. It was so simple. We just had to change some facts. Connect the dots. What connected them? Kimberly asked. "The Geists, right? We know someone was killing off Geists starting after Bartholomew died, but it really ramped up in 1984. Most of them were wiped out in a matter of months. The factory fire killed no one. It seemed unrelated, but Constance just told us that two of the Geists, Carlisle and his son Benson, were there and only survived because some mystery woman intervened. But then Carlisle dies in the mysterious film set disaster. Then everyone left dies in the manor fire. Then, Jed is killed by Lillian. Somehow, the Centennial is involved even though it happens 8 years later. Why 8 years? These disasters must be related because Carousel is putting them in front of us, but how? Wait, Bobby said. He didn't say anything after that. He must not have figured it out yet. Is it a coincidence that the oldest living Geist at any given time becomes the target of these disasters? I said. That's the pattern. Carlisle at the factory, but he survives. Carlisle, at the film set, dies. Stephen Geist, Lillian's dad and the middle child of Bartholomew Geist, dies at the manor fire along with almost every other Geist. Then nothing. Nothing for 8 years. Jed is the oldest Geist during that period. Whatever this is, it can't kill Jed. Silas Deal protected him. It doesn't kill Lillian for some reason, even though she was secretly alive the whole time. Maybe it only kills men. Maybe Carousel just wanted to torture Lillian. I don't know. On the night before the Centennial, Lillian kills Jed, and then she becomes the oldest living Geist right on time for the Centennial disaster, I said. They were quiet. But that doesn't make sense, Ant-Man said. Lillian didn't die in the Centennial. She died 3 years later because you reminded her of her trauma. I didn't say it was perfect, I said. If it killed every Geist it went after, Kimberly said, why didn't it keep going after her? I don't know, I said. I came up with the idea, and then the omen showed up, so I must be onto something. The point is, Dinah said, Speaking up for the first time in a while, we need to know that something is targeting the oldest living Geist, right? That's the part that matters. Exactly, I said. We can figure out how Lillian survived later. We found the omen. We're as ready as we are going to get. Let's go try not to die. They didn't seem too excited over what I had come up with. We were missing pieces, but I was excited to have progress of any kind. We started to prepare our tropes. It was impossible to get a perfect setup. We figured out our strategy. We had been working on this for some time. We were as ready as we were going to be. We approached the car, which had been idling for the length of the time we had been talking. A voice rang out, "Are you coming? We need to get there soon, Ant-One." Ant-One was in the front of the pack as usual. He opened the car door. I leaned down to get a glimpse of the driver before I got in the back seat. He was well dressed, almost dapper. He might have been in his mid-20s. I recognized him, though he looked different than I remembered. Much younger. Roderick Gray. Plot Armor 3. There was no mayor next to his name. And then, in a blink, I wasn't there anymore. There was no brown sedan. There was no young Roderick Gray. What I saw before me was a large room, a living room. It was peculiar because the walls were fake. I could see them being held up by 2x4s. There was camera equipment behind me. I was in a large warehouse of some kind. It was dark. "Do you plan on doing anything today?" A voice rang out behind me. I recognized it. I had heard it on my way to the tutorial. I turned to see Carlisle Geist. "You know, Mr. Lawrence," he said while puffing on a pipe, "you really are wasting time. Now get over here. We have to rework our next scene, or the only people we'll be scaring are the investors." Chapter 57 Player Stats, Player. Plot Armor. Metal. Moxie. Hustle. Savvy. Grit. Riley. 27 halves. 3. 7. 6. 7. 4. Ant-One. 25. 7. 4. 5. 2. 7. Kimberly. 23. 3. 9. 5. 1. 5. Dinah. 21. 3. 3. 5. 3. 7. Bobby. 22. 3. 7. 5. 3. 4. Isaac. 16. 2. 4. 3. 3. 4. Cassie. 17. 2. 7. 4. 3. 1. Player Tropes. Riley Lawrence is the film buff. Trop Limit, 9. Trop Master grants him the ability to perceive enemy tropes, but at the cost of sacrificing half of his plot armor. As an oblivious bystander, Riley remains untargeted by enemies as he convincingly acts oblivious to their presence. Escape Artist buffs his hustle to help enact plausible escape plans. The insert shot makes allies aware of an object the player chooses. The object will be shown to the audience and its use will be buffed in the finale. Director's Monitor allows him to watch the rest of the storyline after his demise via Deathwatch. Flashback Revelation allows him to communicate with allies from Deathwatch through flashbacks to his past dialogue. Casting Director gives him a summary of his team's roles in the storyline. My Grandmother Had the Gift. A background trop that gives Riley's character some ambiguous connection to the gift through his heritage. Cutaway Death sends him off-screen before the moment of his character's implied demise and allows him to exist behind the scenes written off if he survives the encounter. Deadman War King buffs his grit substantially after his death becomes inevitable, potentially stretching out his last moments. He did not equip Cinemaseer, coming to a theater near you. I don't like it here. Outlier Light, Location Scout, The Wrong Reel, Raised by Television, What Doesn't Kill Them Makes Them Angry, or Method to the Madness. Kimberly Madison is the eye candy. Trop Limit, 8. Convenient backstory allows her to believably change her backstory to assist with the current task, buffing the relevant stat. Social Awareness allows her to see the Moxie stat of all enemies and NPCs. Get a room. boosts the odds of important discoveries when exploring with a love interest during the party. A hopeless plea forces the captor to explicitly deny her release once she asks to be released. Pregnancy reveal buffs her grit when she pretends that she is pregnant and buffs the father's medal if she dies. When in Rome buffs her grit until rebirth if her performance matches the tone of the movie. Does anyone have a scrunchie? Allows her to shift Moxie's points into another stat by putting her hair up. Carousel Academy Awards buffs her Moxie based on the quality of her performance in the previous storyline. She did not equip ellipses, looks don't last, typecast, breaking the veil of silence, the woman in mourning, or that's what I said. And Gwen Stone is the athlete. Trop limit, 9. His you were having a nightmare. Trop allows him to repress or heal mental trauma. He is not strong enough to use its plot resetting powers yet. Gym Rat buffs Medal and Hustle by revealing athletic backstory. It's part of the uniform gives him higher medal when attacking with sports equipment. Just walk it off heals the hobbled status by walking. Knight in Shining Armor buffs his medal and grit when defending a love interest. Timeout allows him to go off-screen during a fight, reducing enemy aggression. Brandishing a weapon is like a security blanket, buffing his grit and soothing his and his allies' fear. Swinging it will cause his opponents to falter, if only for a moment based on Moxie because of swing away. Better make it count greatly buffs the last round of ammunition the player has available in a fight. He did not equip reload after cut, off the bench, everyone loves a winner, the playbook, a race against time, coyote in a trap, or bad luck magnet. He also didn't use play it cool because he worried that Carousel was planning something nefarious by giving it to him. Dynacano is the outsider. Trop limit, 8. Guarded personality resists all insight abilities. An outsider's perspective alerts her to new, out of place, or unusual information. Better late than never buffs Medal and Hustle if she waits until the finale to assist allies on screen against the enemy. A haunted past, a background trop that gives her character some past trauma that haunts her and gives her access to various tropes. Encouragement from beyond soothes her when stressed, scared, or in pain and may provide useful information. Outside looking in grants her the ability to discern ideal spots to linger and observe events without actively participating in the narrative. They fell off allows her to quickly get out of handcuffs and similar restraints. She can leave physical or mental messages in the story that her allies can detect when in the location she left them with pen pal. Light Fingers buffs the player's attempts at stealing items from the set. She did not equip Savvy Safecracker, you don't know me, but Dark Secret, or they ruined the shot. Bobby Gill is the wallflower. Trop limit, 8. Background noise allows him to get background information from NPCs when off-screen. The Good Samaritan buffs his medal and grit for helping allies in a crisis if they have not met on screen and are strangers. Last-minute casting recasts him as an NPC that is moderately involved in the plot. The selection is seemingly random. He will get some limited background information for the character and some access to the NPC script. From humble beginnings debuffs the player's stats 30% in the party, then but buffs them 15% in rebirth, the finale, and the final battle resulting in a net 15% buff by the end of the story. Craft services are the real heroes. Ensures that there is edible food and water on set somewhere during the storyline. My only role as exposition gives him some useful information to be relayed on screen, but takes it away if he starts to bore the audience. Actually, I'm a veterinarian changes his character's background to being an animal doctor and allows certain tropes to be equipped. If you can't see it, it won't bleed allows him to temporarily mend wounds by covering them from the audience's view. Remember me? Allows him to promote his character to main cast by pretending to know them and introducing himself. He did not equip the hidden infection, the wisdom of crowds, or in that's lunch. Cassie uses the psychic. Trop limit, 8. The anguish lets her see her allies' health stats from anywhere and lets her take some of their pain by feeling it herself. This can reduce her overall injuries. We are not abandoned. Can keep her allies' spirits high by weaving a narrative of some higher power and control. When done well, this drop can heal incapacitation, certain forms of spiritual infection, and even buff grit. Reflective jump scare allows her to get a glimpse of the enemy when she looks in a mirror, giving her some small insight into what is in store. Foreboding signs gives her insight into who will die next and how in character, allowing her to prepare for what is to come. Empathic shield buffs and imperiled allies' grit by expressing genuine concern for them on screen. At your own peril debuffs characters' grit and effective plot armor if they ignore her psychic warnings. Isaac uses the comedian. Drop limit, 8. If he's still cracking jokes. Allows the player to reduce or eliminate injuries by using humor the next time he is on screen before the audience know how injured he is. Works on allies situationally. Weapons of mass absurdity using humorous weapons buffs his metal and hustle. The buff extends to weapons that are used if the original weapon fails. Blood loss delirium gives the player a pleasant drunken stupor when they have major blood loss and provides cover for antics. Gallows humor allows him to ease mental pain with dark humor after a tragedy. Let me get this straight. Allows him to buff their current plan by summarizing the situation and plan to the audience. Trash talk allows him to debuff the enemy's metal by insulting them. Tilde dash tilde. Tilde dash tilde. I hadn't been transported into a role since the anthology. I was dressed differently. My hoodie was gone, replaced by a proper coat. I wore semi-professional clothing. On the bright side, the pocket of the coat still contained my luggage ticket, so I was not without my supplies. Casting director proved to be moderately useful. I was a director who felt Carlisle Geist was stifling my career. That was it. I didn't see anyone else's character descriptions because they weren't here with me. I really did need to stop relying on that drop. I needed to pay attention. I was on screen. Carlisle Geist was on the other side of the room. I walked slowly so I could gather my thoughts. On the red wallpaper, he was Carlisle Geist, the voice. He was plot armor 30. He was not an enemy as far as I could tell. At the very least, I couldn't see his tropes like I could Jedediah and Lillian, but they had been dangerous. He was just a character. Actually, I didn't know what he was. We were in a sound stage, a large building used to shoot scenes for movies on constructed sets. Carlisle was sitting in a kitchen set at a small nook table. He watched me as I walked. I hate to meet you in person under these circumstances, Carlisle Guy said. I need to get some answers about this script. This scene we're supposed to shoot tomorrow is terrible. I was told by Baron that I had you to blame. Me? I asked. I was a film director in this story. I must have been directing the film in question. I didn't know who Baron was. You're Riley Lawrence, the hotshot young director who's here to bring the studio back to relevance, right? He said it with an ironic humor. His voice was deep, clear, and intelligent sounding. That's me, I said. He opened the screenplay up and spread it out on the little table between us. I read the front quickly. Untitled by Elliot something. December, 1983. Carlisle smoked his pipe calmly. He was around the same age Jedediah had been when he died. They looked alike, though Carlisle had a vigor that Jed did not. He began to do a mix of reading the script aloud and commenting on it. Our heroine exposes her breasts, her honor almost contained within frame. She turns to the mirror and gazes at herself. She is looking for imperfections but finds none. Okay, whatever. I'm sure that was a useful direction for casting. Dialogue with mother, basic filler setting up the character. There's a dance of some kind, it doesn't matter. He skimmed through the scene until he found the right page. Here it is, he said. While heroine is modeling her tight sweater for the mirror, the camera pans to a face in the window. The face belongs to a mask and the mask belongs to the killer. After he was done reading, he looked up at me. What is this? She's changing clothes in a room with the blinds open. Okay, fine, that is not without precedent. This script implies nudity or near nudity, which is worse because it's cowardly. But this is not tasteful in the least bit. We are meant to cheer for this young woman. Why do we spend 2.5 pages discussing how full her breasts are? It was an 80s script. Carlyle must not have kept up with the times. Artless nudity of that era was a different animal from the stuff from decades prior. I think the goal, I said, is to have the viewer distracted by her assets so that when the face appears, the scare is more effective. Also, every 15-year-old and his buddies are going to get their older brothers to buy a ticket for them when they hear there's nudity in it. It's disgraceful, he said. Nudity in horror is meant to heighten the sense of vulnerability. Juxtaposing nude characters with clothed ones is supposed to suggest moral turpitude versus innocence. It's shorthand. The stuff in this scene, this is pornography. She is a strong-willed character who fights to the very end to survive. This scene confuses the message and makes our heroine out to be some sort of meat for sale at the butcher. I won't have it. It was a strange mix of values, but nothing I hadn't seen expressed in countless horror films. Innocent characters never engage in sex or rock and roll. They never change clothes alone in their rooms, either, apparently. You want her to remain clothed, I said. I don't want our audience focused on that aspect of her, but the problem is bigger than that, he said. The killer is supposed to be this out-of-control psych ward patient or something. That's actually a misdirect, I think, I said. The script didn't reveal who the killer was exactly in the part one had read, but it ham-fistedly suggested it was an escaped mental patient. I thought it was the psychiatrist framing the mental ward patient based on some subtle clues, but I hadn't read enough to be sure. Whatever he is, Carlyle said. He looks like a pervert. The audience will feel like a pervert. Is that what we want? Off-screen. That was an odd place to go off-screen, but I supposed getting lectured by an old-school film producer was not the most titillating stuff for the audience. I did my best to look like I was being scolded. No, I said. Baron tells me you were dead set on the scene being shot the way it was written, he said. I shook my head. Sometimes Baron uses other people's names to share his opinions as a shield. Carlyle looked at me funny. That remark was a mistake. I didn't know Baron. Normally, a player could improvise a line like that and Carousel would go along with it, but Carlyle was likely not connected to the script. He couldn't adapt to my improvisation. I sat as he looked at me and waited to see if my statement about the mysterious Baron was acceptable. It didn't take too long. Carlyle started to laugh. I laughed with him. Baron has been my intermediary for years. I suppose he couldn't have maintained the post unless he knew how to shift blame. He laughed again. You know, when I was a decade older than you, I wrote the script for the original Prognosis Terror. This was before it was an anthology. Did you know that? I shook my head. I put my heart and soul into that script. A mad doctor, killing, butchering, turning his patients into animal-human hybrids. It was complete garbage, but everyone told me it was wonderful. Everyone, except my father. He leaned back as far as the metal chair would let him and his eyes drifted up to the ceiling as he thought back. He took the script and chopped it down, combined it with 3 other shorts about medical horror, and that is what made it into theaters. I didn't even get a credit for it. He told me, "It's my name that sells the movie, son. Mine." He started to laugh. I suppose you imagine that that is exactly what I'm doing to you? I didn't write the script, I said. That's true, he said. But still. I know I am stepping on your toes. I don't do it because I deem you incapable. I watched your directorial debut, you know. Subject of inquiry, wasn't it? About the Mercers. Oh, I said, slightly caught off guard. Yes. Not bad. Science fiction is not something the studio does a lot of. You played a role in the film too, didn't you? I didn't realize that until I got a look at you in person. I laughed nervously. I died in the second act, I said. Yes, he said. Torn apart by an invisible monster. You'll have to tell me how you made it look so real. I smiled. It felt real too. He laughed and picked up the script in his hands and handed it to me. What would you fix about this scene? I took the page and opened it up to the marked section and read it quickly. It was a simple, cliché scene from a slasher. Nothing fancy. Carlyle's summary had been accurate. Well, I said. We don't want to reveal the killer this early into the film, but we need his presence felt. We could do the shot from his point of view. Carlyle seemed interested. Expand on that. We move the camera around the outside of house from where the killer's eyes would be. We see him checking doors, making sure the neighbor's lights are off, checking the woodshed. I said. We show he is being meticulous and careful. Then, he sees the light flick on in the main character's room. She is changing but we don't see anything. We see her step up to the window in each outfit, her breast covered each time so she can look in the mirror. We hear her conversation with her mom on the phone. The killer is in a safe spot to hide, or so we think. He tries to move, she hears something. She looks out the window. She's alert. The audience knows she won't die easy. She's alert, Carlyle repeated. She looks confident, clever. She could even say something like, "Let me give the phone back to Dad," I said. But she is alone in the house, Carlyle said. The killer doesn't know that, I said. He can't risk it. He leaves out of an abundance of caution, which helps foreshadow that the killer isn't a mental patient but is actually. I flipped to the pages around the place I felt the reveal would be in the finale, the psychiatrist, like I said. That also explains why he doesn't attack her that night. There's no explanation for why he moves to his next target in the current script. He just does. Carlyle laughed. I like it. The killer's point of view for the camera. We've done that before, of course. Useful technique if done correctly. I nodded. You can use it to tell the audience information about the killer. How they move, what they focus on, how big they are. That sort of thing. If the killer was extraordinarily tall, that would be intimidating, he said. Or very small can be scary too, I said. Who would be afraid of a short slasher? Carlyle asked playfully. I shrugged my shoulders. Maybe it's a child's doll possessed by a voodoo serial killer, I don't know. Could be effective. Carlyle laughed. We'll have to do one like that. Sounds like an absolute ball. On screen. The phone started to ring. I almost ignored it out of habit from our strange phone at the hotel. Carlyle wasn't the sort of man to answer his own phone, and we appeared to be the only two people in the studio. I got up and found a phone on the wall next to a door that led to some offices. Hello, I said. Benson Geist for Carlyle Geist, the other voice said. It was a woman, likely Benson's secretary. I'll put him on, I said. Carlyle heard what I said, so he was up out of his chair in a moment to come take the phone. Who is it? Your son. Benson, I said. Carlyle rolled his eyes and took the phone. Yes, I'm here. I could hear a voice on the other end, but I didn't know what it said. Son, Carlyle said sternly. I am working at the studio. Some more talking. You wanted to be CEO, you're CEO. Why are you still calling me? The person on the other side spoke again. This time, Carlyle looked alarmed. I see, he said. I'll take care of it. He hung up the phone. I am the only person in this family that can handle an emergency, aren't I? He said under his breath. He turned to me. Riley, it had occurred to me that my driver is away doing errands. Could you drive me up the road? I nodded my head. Thanks, he said. There's been a break-in at one of the factories. Chapter 58. Take this, Carlyle said, handing me the script. He sounded annoyed at having to break away from our work. Go through it and make sure everything is consistent with what we talked about. I tucked the pages into the inside pocket of the jacket I had been dressed in and nodded. Carlyle retrieved his coat and a cane that he never actually used and led me out to the parking lot. As we passed by an office, I noticed that some headshots were pinned up on a bulletin board. One was labeled Final Girl. The headshot was of Kimberly. She was playing the main character in the movie we were making. That made sense as far as casting went. I was a film director, and Kimberly was an actress. I saw her casting entry appear on the red wallpaper right under mine. Kimberly Madison, a talented up-and-coming actress who hopes to be seen as more than eye candy one day. She plays the lead in the new slasher Geist Productions is creating. Thanks, casting director. Off-screen. Have you met her? Carlyle asked. He must have seen where I was looking. Oh, Miss Madison? Yes, a few times, I said. What are your thoughts? Was she just cast for her looks, or do we have a real starlet on our hands? I think she's got what it takes to be a real talent, I said. Unfortunately, she's been pigeonholed by roles that are more plot-focused, and she hasn't had the opportunity to show her range. That sounded like the kind of answer I should give. Perhaps in the future, she will get that opportunity, Carlyle said. Back in the early days we would invest in our stars, give them room to grow. After I had to step back from the movie side of the business, the penny pinchers have just about killed my father's legacy. So this is permanent? I asked. You're taking back over movie production? Oh yes, he answered. I've been chomping at the bit to get back into showbiz for years. One thing after another needed my attention. Never could spare the time. Always had to make sure there was coin in the coffers, you understand. I can't imagine, I said. I had no idea what my car was supposed to look like. Luckily, there was only one car in sight. I reached into my pocket, and the car keys were there to greet me. The ride there was pleasant. Carlyle talked about his plans to start making proper movies, not just the cheap slashers that had overtaken the brand as of late. He seemed genuinely enthusiastic about it. I got the impression that Carousel had been keeping him from his love of entertainment on purpose. Unlike Jedediah, Carlyle did not appear to believe it was a mystical conspiracy. He was fairly optimistic. His attitude soured as we pulled into the parking lot of the factory in question. You can come inside, Carlyle said. No need to stay out in the cold. This shouldn't take too long. I turned off the car and left the vehicle unlocked. Carousel was keeping an eye on it for me, I was sure. I followed Carlyle inside. He continued to carry his cane but did not use it. We were let into the factory by a guard who recognized Carlyle. I had to suppress a grin as we walked inside the large building. It was a movie factory. I could see half a dozen or more products being moved around on conveyor belts in nonsensical ways. I saw raw metal scrap go inside one side of a large room-sized machine and come out the other side in little pieces that a factory worker quickly assembled into a die-cast horse toy. The factory made everything from lunch trays to radios. I didn't know a lot about how these types of places were engineered in the real world, but it couldn't be efficient to arrange it like that. It was probably great for the camera, though. It was like watching Santa's workshop but with more horror memorabilia. Look at this, Carlyle said. He grabbed a die-cast kid's lunchbox from a stack of boxes as we passed by it and handed it to me. My heart nearly leaped from my chest. The mysterious scarecrow. The letters on the front of the lunchbox said. I recognized the scarecrow. It was Benny the haunted scarecrow from The Final Straw too. He was strung up in his cornfield just as I remembered him. What's this? I said, turning it over. There was more writing on the back. Beware. The Patchers family farm hides a spooky secret, a mysterious scarecrow that appeared one dark night amidst the whispering cornfields. Is it a guardian of the farm or a ghostly presence with tricks up its sleeve? Dare to discover the truth at Patchers family farm in Erie East Carousel. Carlyle beamed at it. The Patchers have a small-time attraction over past the circus grounds. This is their newest feature. We gave them a deal on the merchandise, and they asked yours truly to voice the recording for their attraction, you know, the audio track that plays over and over near the concessions and whatnot. You should check it out. He changed to his spooky announcer voice. Beware the mysterious scarecrow that walks by the light of the moon and sees more in the dark than you do in the light. He smiled, proud of his narration. Sounds fun, I said. I couldn't think of something more engaging than that. Ordinarily, I would think this was Carousel teasing me about an old horrifying encounter, but Geist didn't appear connected to the script. I got this strange feeling that Carlyle did that bit of his own free will. I was invited to the grand opening last autumn, of course, he said. I ended up not going. I might give it a try this year, health permitting. He turned and walked further into the factory. The deeper in we got, the louder things became. On screen. The offices were positioned above the factory floor at the back of the building so that someone standing in them could look out over the floor and watch the workers. We had to take a large set of metal stairs to get to the top. Before we got there, the door to the office swung open, and I saw none other than Benson Geist according to the red wallpaper. His plot armor was level 30. He was neither an NPC, a player, nor an enemy. He was a Geist. That was all there was to him on the red wallpaper. Benson Geist, the businessman. Son, Carlyle said. Benson nodded as a greeting. I apologize for calling you away from your hobbies. You ought to, Carlyle said. Now tell me about this break-in. Benson looked past Carlyle at me. Perhaps we should speak alone. He held out his arm, welcoming his father to the office. There's no need, Carlyle said, walking past his son and into the office. We won't be here long. They took the file about the nasty business last autumn, Benson said. Carlyle stopped in his tracks, took a deep breath, and without turning around to look at me, said, Riley, on second thought, you had better get going. Will do, I said. I glanced over at Benson as a sort of hello or goodbye, but I was met only by his cold stare. I turned and walked down the stairs. I wasn't sure if I remembered the way out. In fact, I was almost positive I didn't, but I still found my way to the parking lot in record time. I was still on screen. I walked back to my car, and before I even opened the door, a pair of headlights flashed at me from across the road and down the street. A brown car waited in the parking lot down there. Even from a distance, I recognized it. It was the same car that had acted as the omen, the same car that the future mayor was driving. Why did he want my attention? Tilde. I drove my car over to the lot next to the brown car and looked over inside. Future Mayor Roderick Gray was there, as were Antoine and Isaac. Another man was there, a short man named Ricky Zaragoza. He was a regular NPC with 3 plot armor. He wore a button-up shirt with a huge wing collar. Antoine Stone, a former Geist Foundry worker whose guilt over the loss of his friend and co-worker Gail Zaragoza has driven him to take drastic action. Isaac Hughes, the ne'er-do-well son of a prominent Carousel business magnate. He seeks revenge for his family's recent financial woes, resulting in his father's early death, which he blames on the Geists. For a moment, I thought casting director had finally given me something. For a moment. Get over here, Roderick said coolly. I shut off my engine and stepped out of the vehicle and walked around to the door where they had left me an empty seat. The old man's in there, right? Ricky Zaragoza asked. I got a sinking feeling. Yep, I said. It's all coming together, Ricky said, slapping his hands together. I can feel it. He yelled like he was cheering at a hockey game. Ricky was on some flavor of narcotic. Or several. There's no backing down now, Roderick said. We came too far for this. Grab the flask. Antoine was in the passenger seat. He bent down and grabbed a large, leather-bound flask from his duffel bag. It looked old. The body was constructed out of some sort of silvery metal, and the leather stretched over it was hand-stitched, with strange symbols in it. There was a large opening at the top with a cork to seal it. We sure about this? I said. Let's go over it one more time. I was getting the feeling I knew what was about to happen, but wanted to be sure. All of our dreams are about to come true, Roderick said. We can't keep going over this. We have to take action. We gotta get revenge on those cocksuckers, Ricky Whisper screamed. They say those guys get whatever they want because they worship the devil. We got ourselves a bigger devil. The chick who works at the psychic shop told us that. I couldn't remember if I had heard an NPC cuss. I almost smiled from surprise. This must have been a serious storyline. She also said we shouldn't be messing with it, Antoine said. Are you getting cold feet now? Ricky asked. No, he's not, Roderick said. We're all in this. Right after he said, chick who works at the psychic shop, my casting director trop activated. Cassie Hughes, a talented practitioner of the occult. She will help any cause for a price. Perhaps even she cannot handle the true cost. We all know why we're here, Roderick said. Let's get on with it. He pulled out a handful of small slips of paper from his pocket. Ballots from that sham election, he said. I know the guys are behind it. The moment I talked about raising taxes on their businesses, my campaign was dead in the water. It was probably dead in the water when he ran for elected office in his mid-20s. Maybe I wouldn't have won, he said. But I know I got more than 3% of the vote. He shoved the ballots into the flask's wide opening. Ricky was next. He had been sitting on a file folder that he produced and grabbed a large paper-clipped stack from inside it. It appeared to be some sort of settlement from a lawsuit with the guys. This must have been the file stolen from the factory office. He read selected lines from it. Unfortunate lapse in judgment from Mr. Zaragoza. Unprecedented risky behavior. Repeated warnings. Improper use of safety equipment. He read each line with venom. They killed my brother, he said. And they said it was because of an unfortunate convergence of bad luck. That's bull. Gail was more careful than anybody in that plant. Tell them, Antoine. Ricky started shoving bits of the paper into the flask. He couldn't fit the whole thing, but he sure tried. He was the best, Antoine said. It was their negligence that killed him, faulty safety equipment, plain and simple. Why make things safe when you have all the lawyers in town on the payroll? Ricky said, crying as he talked. They buried it. They gave us chump change. Gail's poor wife was strong-armed. It wasn't even in the newspapers. Oh, it's about to be in the papers, Roderick said. He started to laugh. I looked at Antoine and then Isaac. We were all freaked out. I wanted to leave at that moment, but it was clear this was the story Carousel wanted to tell. Unlike Reply the Departed, which we knew had a very lax, straightforward plot where players didn't have to do much, this story probably wouldn't allow us to opt out, at least if we wanted the true ending. We had to go along, and none of us wanted to. Antoine, Roderick said, you're next. Antoine pulled out a pink piece of paper. I said one word to that safety inspector after Gail died. I just told the truth. He ratted me out to management. He was corrupt. They fired me that same day. He shoved the pink paper into the flask. It was Isaac's turn. They undercut my family business. One by one, that bastard Benson guys took out all of our companies. They could afford to price things at cost. Under cost even. How could we compete with that? He shoved what appeared to be a coupon for a set of tires into the flask. Antoine leaned the flask toward me. I knew what I needed to do. I now understood why every meaningful conversation Carlisle and I had was off-screen. They wanted to portray him in a particular way, whether he matched the persona or not. He brought me to this town with promises of creative control. He was going to let me make a name for myself. As soon as I got here, it was clear that was a lie. My career is as good as dead unless I do everything he says. I ripped off the cover of the script Carlisle had been working on with me and crammed it down into the flask. Roderick took the flask from Antoine. There are 1,000 other people who have legitimate grievances with the Geist family that can't be here tonight. We're doing this for them too. I talked to the lawyer, he said. The estate is all wrapped up in a trust controlled by the oldest living Geist and monitored by some banker named Dear Khan. We're going to use this curse to kill the Geists one at a time. When they're all gone, the estate gets sold. Carousel will be free. He started to laugh. The witch said we were supposed to put our intentions into the flask, Isaac said, barely hiding a grin from having called his sister a witch. Have we done that yet? I think so, Roderick said. Now let's do our duty. Roderick pulled out a match from his pocket. Wait, Antoine said. The psychic told us that taking revenge with a curse is risky. Are we sure we want to do this? I am, Roderick said. We are. He struck the match against the side of the flask and dropped it in the opening. Immediately, smoke poured out of the top of the silver canteen, and we all rushed to exit the vehicle. Roderick still held the flask as the smoke built and was eventually blown away in the wind. For a moment, we stood still and looked at each other. Did it work? Ricky asked. It worked, Roderick said. I can feel it. Antoine, Isaac, and I looked at each other in horror. On the red wallpaper, a screen appeared that was all black. Soon, I saw the night sky. The camera I was watching appeared to be flying through the sky with little wisps of smoke coming into frame here and there. I was seeing the smoke fly through the sky from its point of view. The smoke flew over the town and dove into a plot of earth. I couldn't tell where, but I could have sworn I saw a gravestone. Smoke poured down into grass and dirt. My view changed. I was no longer seeing the world from the point of view of the smoke. I saw dirt flying away from the camera. We were seeing from the point of view of a person who crawled from the earth and looked around. I had seen a gravestone. They were in a cemetery. The person whose view the footage was coming from stood up. They were tall. They took huge, steady steps. Whose idea was it to see from the killer's point of view again? I looked over at Aunt One and Isaac. From the look on their faces, they could see it too. Chapter 59. Aunt One, Isaac, and I jumped into my car. We watched the screens that had appeared in our minds. We were off-screen. Future Mayor Gray and the coked-out Ricky Zaragoza got back into the brown car and silently watched the factory. "What is happening?" Isaac said, clearly not ready to be watching film footage in his mind's eye. What was happening? We were seeing the killer, I assumed, making his way through the twilight toward the factory. We were seeing things through his eyes. When Carlisle and I were going over the script for the movie we're making, I suggested we show a scene from the killer's point of view. Carousel must have thought it would be funny to do that for us in the storyline, I said. "I don't like this," Isaac said. His shield wall of sarcasm and jokery was not equipped to help him deal with the video feed playing in his head. "I can hear it breathing." "Yeah," I said. "Imagine that. Hearing a killer's breath in your ear." Luckily, this was not the same thing as what I was used to. This was audio playing on the red wallpaper, which sounded like an echo, almost like a radio playing in the next room. The axe murderer sounded like he was right behind you. Which is weird since it did just crawl out of a grave. "So it's not a zombie if it's breathing," Ant-Man said. "Not the normal kind, at least," I said. I tried to project an air of confidence, as if it might soothe Isaac. The truth was it was incredibly scary sitting there in the car waiting for the killer to walk toward its victim. "He is on the other side of the factory," Ant-Man said. "He's walking into the sunset." That was a nice observation. The downside was we wouldn't get to see the baddie in action. "We're safe for now," I said. "We're not anywhere near first blood." In fact, the needle had barely ventured into the party phase. This was shaping up to be a long story. We waited and watched as the killer walked along toward the factory. "You know, it's kind of funny," I said. "He hasn't walked past a single civilian. That's how it is in the movies. No one sees the hulking monster making its way across town." It reminded me of one of the enemy tropes I had seen before on Ranger Danger. "Are we supposed to just sit here?" Isaac asked. Aunt One and I looked at each other. I'd let him answer. "Our characters want the guys dead. Sitting here and watching it is what our characters would do. You have to be in character, or else Carousel gets mad," he said. Isaac had not yet had a taste of playing an actual character with preset motivations and desires. Aunt One and I had only had a taste of it. "Our characters suck," Isaac said. "I think mine is supposed to be stupid. Everyone in his family talked to me like I was an idiot earlier today. Apparently, I crashed my car in a lake, too. I don't get how we're the main characters, either. Aren't we like the bad guys? We summoned whatever this thing is." "Breathe, man," I said. "We're all right. Being the main characters does not mean we are good people. Besides, in this story, I get the sense that the killer will eventually turn on us. It's what we deserve." I imagined that didn't help calm Isaac's nerves, but he needed to be prepared for that reality. We were the worst kind of horror movie characters, we were complicit. Frankly, I doubted I was a main character. I got the sense that my character was someone the audience would love to see die. The over-sexualized movie script and the terrible motivation for taking a life all added up to me getting the kibosh. "There's the factory," Antoine said as the video feed on the red wallpaper finally showed the killer approaching the building in front of us. "Should we go take a peek?" I thought about it. I could use a look for Tropmaster. I would love to know exactly what we were dealing with, but there were other concerns. "Maybe we don't want our characters to know too much about what they've done," I said. "They can't see the pop cam of the killer approaching. Do they even know what this thing is supposed to look like? I know it would help my oblivious bystander strategy if my character didn't see the killer just yet." Antoine nodded. "I just hate sitting here watching. I don't know where Kimberly is," he said. "She might be in there." I shook my head. "She's an actress in my character's movie. I imagine she won't get center stage until later," I said. That seemed to soothe his worries. The killer's live feed was very strange from that point forward. He approached a loading dock door and climbed up into the building like it was nothing, even though that involved a 5-foot vertical. I heard a sharp snap right before the bay door slammed behind him. He walked forward. The video changed color. It was the lighting. It was orange and bright all of a sudden. "What is happening?" Isaac asked. I didn't know. The camera turned toward the desk with a stack of papers and a lamp. The bulb in the lamp burst, catching one of the papers on fire. The fire spread. The figure continued walking. I hoped it would come across a window or mirror so we could see its reflection, but it never did. It walked forward. A drinking fountain hanging on the wall lunged forward as a pipe burst behind it. Water started spraying out from the fountain. The water landed on a machine that was pressing metal discs into shapes. The machine began to spark as the killer walked by. Carousel was putting on a show for us. The sparking machine started spraying oil. I could see people in the distance. They were wearing ear protection while they buffed some metal die-cast parts. They had no idea what was happening. The killer was not in the same building as the office where Benson and Carlisle were, but Hall was connected to buildings. Then, for the first time, I got a glimpse of the killer, though it was only just a quick look at his hand as he grabbed a large rod of metal from a scrap heap. It had a rusty, jagged end. The killer continued through the building. Sparks flew. Oil leaked. A light fixture fell from above and landed just to the left of the killer. He continued walking miraculously, never crossing paths with a witness until he found himself in the same building as the office. I didn't want to watch. It turned out I would never have to. In the distance, I heard a siren. Then another. Pretty soon, the night air was filled with the sound of fire engines. "That's some great response time," Antoine said. I could tell he was rattled. "They got here already and the smoke isn't even visible in the air." Fire trucks started to pour in from every street. Police and ambulances were right after them. Soon, the fire started to burn in earnest. I could see an orange glow over the building where the killer had entered. A loud crash sounded. The building was coming apart. On the red wallpaper, the feed continued. The killer stopped short. It stood in a hallway just in view of the stairs that would lead up to the office. "Why isn't he moving?" Isaac asked. I couldn't say. The longer it stayed in that spot, the worse the ambient destruction became in that area. An alarm sounded. Firefighters burst into the factory and started escorting workers out. The killer stood still and watched, having found a perfect spot to never be seen by anyone. "That's got to be the work of a trop," I said. "Has to be," Antoine agreed. Meanwhile, workers poured out of the factory, coughing and screaming for their friends. The killer watched as Carlisle was led down the stairs by a firefighter. Benson was dragged behind, screaming about how he needed to empty the safe. Carlisle and Benson were evacuated. The firefighters turned their attention to putting out the flames. They failed. The killer, or whatever it was, never left the factory, even as the walls collapsed and everything that could ignite went up in flames. Eventually, the feed cut off with a loud crunch. "Did he just die?" Isaac asked. I shrugged my shoulders. On screen, Knuckles rapped against Antoine's window. It was future Mayor Gray. He looked absolutely ticked off. Antoine opened the door. Gray started ranting, "They didn't even die. That's Carlisle Geist over there with the cane. He pointed in the distance. What the hell just happened? Ricky Zaragoza was in the brown car next to mine, wide-eyed. He had been crying. What did we just do? He kept saying over and over again. It was all too real for him. He got out of the car and started pacing in circles. What did we just do, man? What did we just do? It could have killed all of them. He let off a string of expletives. This can't just be coincidence. This was us. It's no good. We might have killed somebody. He bent down and threw up. We didn't kill the person we were after. Roderick Gray said. He's right there. He, too, let off a string of curse words, but for different reasons. Antoine and I looked at each other. This is too real for me, I said. I can't be a part of this anymore. We were only supposed to be getting revenge, Antoine said. Those are my friends in there that almost got burned alive. Isaac stayed in the back seat, bent over like he had a stomach cramp. I didn't think it was going to work, I said. I thought it was just a little game. I didn't think it was going to work. Antoine let loose a stream of tears. I was caught off guard by that. Since when was he that good of an actor? He immediately tried to hide that he had done it, to wipe away the tears. We are not done. Gray said. We started this. We need to finish it. You hear me? Ricky was dry-heaving behind the brown car. We meet back up at the diner tomorrow, Gray said. We have plans to make. You better show. I don't understand. Why didn't it work? We need to talk to that psychic. Off-screen. Ricky and Roderick Gray got in the brown car and left after a few minutes. Something strange happened. It felt like we were between the scenes, but for some reason, the scene kept going on over near the factory. The NPCs must have been keeping up their act for the benefit of the guys. Fascinating. I still half expected the guys to eventually reveal that on some level, they were controlled and not just manipulated, but it hadn't happened yet. When I saw the script while Lillian Geist told her backstory, it had been written as if the scriptwriter knew the gist of what she would say. I couldn't tell if that was her reacting to the script or the script reacting to her. I didn't know which possibility was more perplexing. We were just scratching the surface of the storyline. Even now, the needle on the plot cycle had barely moved. This was the backdrop of what was to come. That was the only explanation. I opened my car door and got out. You guys wait here, I said. The factory was a few blocks away. I ran the whole way there until I found Carlisle in the parking lot. Riley. Carlisle exclaimed. What are you doing back here? I saw the smoke. I got a funny feeling. Came back as fast as I could, I said, thinking quickly. What happened? Did you guys have a meltdown or something? I noticed Carlisle was using his cane and clutching his chest. He didn't answer me at first. You all right? I asked, bracing his shoulder with my hand. I'm fine, Carlisle said. It's nerves. That's all. Nerves. He took a few deep breaths as firefighters ran around us. The blaze was still going strong inside. Something in there was sputtering and spitting glowing metal. I don't know what caused it, he said. The foundry wasn't even online. The machinery couldn't have caused this. I just don't know. Let's get back away from the building, I said. Is everyone all right? Carlisle seemed to be off in his own world briefly. He eventually answered. Yes. Everyone is all right, he said. Apparently a young woman saw the smoke and called in the fire department. If she hadn't, we would have all been trapped. I've had some close calls in my life, but this may have been the closest to death I have ever been. I could hear the building falling down as we ran. How could it fall apart that quickly? I stood with him for some time more. He was clearly in shock. I waited until a man driving a town car came to bring him home. I couldn't help but feel sorry for the Carlisle. I felt guilty. Even though I didn't really have a choice in the matter, I still felt a piercing pang in my heart. As he left, I had plenty to think about. Earlier, when I saw Kimberly's headshot, her casting director entry appeared on the red wallpaper. When I heard a reference to a certain witch, Cassie's entry had done the same. I got another entry while speaking with Carlisle Geist. Specifically, when he said that a young woman had called in the fire department, a new entry appeared on the red wallpaper. The entry had intrigued me from the moment I saw it. It read, "Ramona Mercer, a woman lost in time. She seeks to find her way back to the Centennial, but she will need an escort." Chapter 60. I froze in place. Never before had casting director thrown me a curveball like that. Ramona Mercer. She was one of the victims of the original Centennial disaster. What kind of link must she have to the storyline and the thrill line itself? I knew who the Mercers were, or at least, I knew that the family could summon a psychokinetic, parasitic poltergeist. I didn't expect them to be connected to the thrill line or, at the very least, the tutorial. Why was casting director telling me information about an NPC? It had never done that before. It sounded like this was an escort mission. That could be tricky. As I considered this, I realized one thing further. If Ramona Mercer had called the fire department, that meant she must have been nearby. I put my head on a swivel and surveyed the crowds of looky-loos who watched the factory burn. There were dozens of them. Only one of them was looking at me. She was a tall woman, I would say. She had dark hair with a streak of red. She dressed practically in a jacket and jeans with Carousel brand Converse All-Stars. I saw nothing for her on the red wallpaper except for a frame with lights, like the one where a player poster was meant to go. No tropes, hidden or otherwise. Not plaques with names on them. The absence of information was revealing in itself. Something was very strange about her. I walked toward her slowly. She walked toward me. As we got closer, I recognized her face from the flashback from Jedediah Geist's story. I kept looking over toward Antoine and Isaac and the car, hoping they would see what I was doing. Eventually, we met in the middle. I slowed a bit so I would still be visible to the car. At a glance, I saw Antoine had gotten out and was watching us. "Ramona Mercer?" I asked cautiously. She didn't confirm or deny it. "You're not supposed to be here," she said. "You're not the director who drives Carlisle Geist to the factory. He's shorter and has a ponytail. You're dressed like him, though." She was gripping something in her jacket pocket. I expected it to be a weapon, so I spoke calmly and slowly. "I'm not the director," I said. "I'm just playing his character." Saying that was enough for her to take a sharp inhale. "You and the others, the plotters, you're all just?" she asked, hoping I would fill in the blank. I looked back toward the car with Antoine and Isaac. "Those two are like me," I said, pointing toward them. "I was watching you," she said. "You didn't say the things they normally say." "No," I said. "We don't know what's on the script. We have to guess." She raised an eyebrow. "Did Mr. Dearcon send you?" she asked. She knew about Silas Dearcon. "We might have been onto something." "More or less," I said. "He hinted someone like you might be here. You want to go to the Centennial, right?" She nodded her head. It sounded like we needed to talk. I convinced her to go against her better judgment and go with us to the diner. She was afraid of us. I didn't blame her. We were probably as alien to her as she was to us. "What is she?" Antoine asked me when she entered the diner before us. "It almost looks like," I said. I was hesitant to continue the thought. "She looks like a player with a missing archetype poster on the red wallpaper," he said, completing the thought. "Doesn't look like an NPC." I had never seen that exact format before. There was the axe murderer who didn't show up on the red wallpaper at all. Outsiders could hide details of their information, but some of it leaked through if you had good savvy or moxie. A blank frame where a poster should go? That was new. We entered in and sat with her at a corner booth. "So," she said. "Tell me what we have to do. I've been waiting years for this. I somehow got elected emissary, so I answered, we're in a storyline. Or a trap, as Jedediah's ghost called it." Her eyes went wide. "You know about that? Oh damn, this is really happening. It couldn't have been that long." She didn't look any older than she had in the flashbacks. "You want to get to the Centennial," I said. "We escort you there. I think that's the mission." She nodded but didn't speak for a moment. She was clearly waiting for more. "That can't be it," she said. "You're not going to explain what's going on?" I looked at Antoine. He shrugged. He was still in a funk. "Tell us what you think this is," I said. "Then I'll tell you what I know." "Hold on," she said. "Mr. Dearcon said that you would arrive to show me the way, assuming he was talking about you. So, enlighten me. I don't know anything. We had to break out of the contest for who knew the least. I decided to start. This is the game at Carousel," I said. "Everything here looks real, but it's fake. We're all playing the game. Maybe even you are, assuming you aren't a part of it." "Game?" she asked. "I'm talking about the time travel, which of course, isn't really time travel." She didn't know about the game, but she did know about something. "Okay," I said. "Time travel. You know that the storyline is set in the past." "Set in the past," she repeated. "The factory is. It's not burned down anymore." "I guess it is now, but you know what I mean. The guys are alive again. Trust me, I checked. It's definitely them, as far as I can tell. Every time I come here, the same events play out. I always intervene because I'm supposed to. Then, a few hours later, nothing. I can't get past today." She took a deep breath. "I was really hoping you all would know what was going on," she said. "You said your name is Riley?" I nodded. "Riley, Antoine, and Isaac," she said. "Guys, I'm pulling out my hair here. I can't tell you how many times I've been through this. I know everything that happens today. I know the name of every person who gets evacuated from the factory, every person who watches from the outside. I know as much as I can about. That thing tries to kill everyone. And it all means nothing. I've been stuck on this day for years." The waitress arrived with some coffee. "Ramona must have ordered it for us. Look, it took me a year just to get to this point, and every time I look at the calendar, it's like another year has passed. I just want to find my sister and save her. I can't do that from 1984. Right now, we should live about 20 blocks that way," she pointed east. "I'm 19 years old and dating a guy that had a job and a place for my sis and me to crash. I can't get there because if I walk too far away, I go back to the present. It's useless. I need your help." She was doing her best to keep her emotions in. Some of the things she said made no sense. If she was trying the storyline over and over, how was she surviving? Was she really able to just walk away from it? It must have had something to do with whatever she was within the game, player or something else. "I don't mean to unload on you," she said. "God, you guys are basically just kids. You go to Carousel you?" I shook my head. She took a deep breath. "Look, I am Ramona Mercer. I went to Carousel East High. Never went to college because I had to take care of my sister. I play guitar for fun and tips. I was not prepared for any of this. I just need your help. Can you do that?" "We'll help you," Antoine said. "You have to help us though. You're not the only one with questions." No one talked for a few minutes. I didn't know what to ask first, and I really didn't want to overwhelm her. After enough silence, she started talking anyway. "I used to come here when I was a teenager to drink coffee and smoke cigarettes," she said, glancing over her shoulder at the cigarette vending machine down the hall near the bathrooms. That was not there normally, but in Carousel 1984, the script said it was. Rebellion came naturally to me. Unfortunately, I had attentive and loving parents who supported me no matter what, so rebelling was kind of a waste. "You say this is all fake. What I want to know is how it happened. Things were normal up until 1992. After that, the town got weird. It's hard to explain. I wish Anna or even Kimberly were there. How do you tell someone that their entire life was a lie? Was I even sure it was a lie? What if she were a relic of a time before the game?" Antoine wasn't usually at a loss for words, but he wasn't talking now. He didn't seem to trust Ramona. How could I blame him? It was only a matter of time before Carousel did something tricky, and this whole situation looked ripe for manipulation. "My understanding," I said, is that 1992 was the year the last game started, so it became the year of the original centennial in this game. I think Carousel uses patterns to decide stuff like that. There was no game in 1992, Ramona said. Everything was normal before the centennial. I simply shook my head. Normal was a relative term. People dying mysteriously, I said. Have you ever been able to leave town? Did it seem like everyone knew who you were? I was operating under the assumption that she was like Jedediah and that she was the center of everyone's attention. What are you talking about? Ramona said. I had a normal life. We went on vacation. We went skiing. We went hiking up north. My mom and stepdad weren't wealthy enough to go too far. After they died, I had to take care of my sister. She was just a kid. I was all she had. No one knew my name. Well, maybe not my first name. She was getting defensive. Convincing Isaac and Cassie that Carousel was an otherworldly entity was only possible because I could show them supernatural things in the red wallpaper. Neither was possible for Ramona. She didn't appear to be able to see the red wallpaper and she was raised to believe the supernatural was normal. I have to assume that whatever happened, it was done to keep you in Carousel, I said. Because everything is scripted? Ramona asked. You say my life is scripted just like the people here in this fake 1984? And this is the same script you say you can't see. She sounded almost receptive, if a little skeptical. Okay, she said. Why? What is the reason? Just give me an answer, dude. Anything. Why go through all the trouble? Why was one of those luxury questions that we couldn't afford. I had no answers. Only guesses, both educated and otherwise. To entertain the audience, I said. That was our most solid lead. You are a character central to the story of Carousel. Ramona started to laugh. You know, that's not at all what it feels like, she said after a moment. Is the audience enjoying me slowly going crazy? It might have been. Hey, Isaac interrupted, is 1984 far enough back in time to be able to order an egg cream? I've always wanted to try one of those. Ramona was temporarily befuddled by that question but then said, how can I be an important character? I'm a loser in every way imaginable. Nothing I try succeeds. They say it's because of the Mercer family curse. I don't know if that's true, but it's starting to feel like it. Carousel and family curses, what a pair. That how your parents died? Ant-Man asked. Your family curse? The big invisible guy who goes berserk on every perceived threat? That caught Ramona off guard. That's just a rumor, she said. Look, boys, I need to make it to the centennial in 1992. So far, I've never been able to make it past January 1st, 1984. In a few hours, I find myself back in the present. I've even seen them haul the cigarette machine onto a truck every time the day resets. Mr. Dearcon said people would come help me if I just triggered the storyline every day. I've done my part every morning for longer than I can remember. I've never made it to the centennial. Now, it's your turn to do your part. We already are, Ant-Man said. The next scene is set in this diner on January 2nd, 1984. Carousel might expect us to actually wait all night, but if it did, it would have shown us to a place to sleep. Since it didn't, I suspect that if we just wait here, the next scene will get here soon. No, Ramona said, shaking her head. I've waited in this diner all night before. It doesn't work. That was an interesting point. She was clearly player adjacent, if not a player outright. Could it be a simple answer? You don't have a role, I said. You aren't playing a character in this story. If the next scene has all of the dirtbags meeting at the diner, but there are no players cast as dirtbags, does the scene even happen? Minor roles don't have to be cast. Perhaps major ones didn't either, but to have no roles at all filled by players. Maybe that was why she couldn't move the story forward. Ant-Man and I discussed the matter in more depth. Isaac stayed quiet. Something was bothering him. Perhaps it was just nerves. After a bit, the bell on the door rang, and we looked up to see Cassie walking in dressed an awful lot like Madame Celia. There you are. Cassie said, rushing to our table. I came as soon as I knew the next scene was at the diner. The mayor guy told me we were meeting to discuss something about the flask. I saw something on the red wallp. She stopped speaking as soon as she saw Ramona. What is she? Cassie asked. I have her as an ally on the red wallpaper. Cassie could see her ally's health on the red wallpaper thanks to her the anguish drop. Normally, only players and paragons acting as players were affected by that drop. Same as with casting director. We're still trying to figure that out, I said. I quickly explained what we knew so far. Cassie listened intently and then looked Ramona over. I don't normally wear dresses, she said. I just woke up in this. Okay, Ramona said. I tapped the table gently. I know you don't trust us, I said. You don't have the luxury of that mattering. I need to know what happened to you. Can you please tell us? Ramona looked down at her coffee. You won't believe me, she said. Or maybe you will. I can't believe I'm saying this. Then, she drank her coffee and began telling the story. Tope continued. Thanks for listening.